Okay. I'll just give everybody a 30 seconds here and then we'll start.
Sounds good.
Right. Welcome to our second breakout section or session of our PBIS Summer Institute. For this session, we're going to be hearing from Jeff Bauer and Amy Stokeland. They're both district behavior specialists supporting PBIS in the Osseo School District. And so thank you again for being here with us. I will hand it over to you guys and take it away.
Awesome, Erin. Thank you for having us again. So Amy and I today are presenting on, as the title says, supporting students with disabilities through positive behavior intervention supports. Throughout the presentation, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat. And Erin, if you see anything through the chat, would you just let us know? We're hoping to have some time at the end to answer questions too, be it the chat ones or just if you have another question then too. All right. So just a couple acknowledgements. I know you've been here for the morning part, but just PBIS is positive behavior intervention supports, and autism spectrum disorder is abbreviated as ASD. It will just shorten the amount of words we need to say and information on the slides.
All right, so one of the things that when we talk about PBIS is that PBIS is not a curriculum, it is a framework. It is tiered approach to promoting safety and positive behavior. The focus is on prevention and not punishment. The three main components are your systems you have in place, the practices you use, and the data you collect. And the primary focus is to be able to be teaching students positive behavior strategies, just like we teach academics, so that they are mirrored in the way we approach them. And that understanding that our students can only meet behavior expectations if they know what those expectations are and they are taught how to meet them. So PBIS focuses on teaching kids what to do, not telling them what they did wrong. And in Osseo schools, all our buildings have implemented PBIS since 2015. And the common things would be having the agreed upon school-wide behavior expectations, that the expectations are taught, so similar to teaching an academic subject, that the expectations are reviewed and practiced throughout the school year, and that schools have systems in place to recognize and acknowledge students who are following those expectations, and that schools have systems in place to reteach and support students, showing that they are not understanding the expectations.
So one of the big things that we really want to talk about is what PBIS looks like in schools, and specifically our Osseo schools. We have numerous elementaries, 4 middles, and 2 high schools in district. As Amy talked about, the big one is having those expectations are directly taught, practiced, and reinforced. The first day and then week of school is a lot of teaching those expectations, talking about what they look like, practicing them. And then throughout the year, though, there's follow-up, probably during assemblies, oftentimes, or even just during the weekly announcements where sometimes there's a video showing about what those look like, or if something needs to be retaught, there's time to be found that one. And then the reinforcement is just built into the fabric of the school. The big one that a lot of students really like is earning the tickets that they can trade in things. But then there's just the subtle ones too of just the positive verbal reinforcement, which makes a huge difference. And I just can't understate how important that is, and really looking to meld that with those expectations, reinforcing those, working with them. And you can see the teachers who just have that experience and it's seamless for them. A big one too then is that consistency in student and adult interactions. We want it to be the same every time. So if this is our expectation, we're teaching that it happens this way each and every time. As we walk through the halls, we're walking this way. We're going to stay to the right. We're going to keep our voices low. We're not talking at all, depending on where we are. And then really respecting each other there. Having that common language among staff through the matrices, The expectations makes it really easy to talk about. So as you move from kindergarten to first grade to third grade, you've heard the same language as a student, and then staff are saying the same things to each other, be it in the classroom, to recess, to music, to gym. That language is super integral to the success there. As I kind of talked about already, the daily routines are practiced and predictable, but this is even more so important about having structure and schedule throughout the day, what your classroom schedule is, and then not changing it unless you really have to, and then really talking with students about what those changes are. And that, as we'll talk about later, really rides super important into working with our autistic students. Then having that school-wide focus on prevention. And that's the big part. It's not reacting, it's setting up the focus on prevention and acting before. So we want the structures for successes, having the matrices, having all teachers know what they are and talking about them, and then how they're taught, as we talked. Efficient and effective responses to behavior. We look at the data to see what works and what does not, and then we change it so it is effective. If we're seeing that our responses for positive reinforcement aren't working, then we need to change it so what is motivating the students. And we can see later as we talk about it, there's some really interesting reinforcement that is specifically tailored to meet students' interests. And that's what we want to look at. School-wide data collection and frequent analysis of planning is really behind the scenes for the staff, but it is super important as we talk about that. We're collecting the data to look at, review, and then they meet with other buildings. They have a building that they meet with and talk about, and then as a large group too, to just review that data, look about what's working, what's not, and having even other PBS teams visit buildings to look at and see what it's looking like, to check off, okay, we're doing this, we're not doing that, we need to improve on that. That really helps with that consistency. So a big thing on PBS, though, is it really requires planful teaching. This is not something I can just walk into, or anybody can walk into. It needs to be planful, set up, and well in advance. As we talked about earlier, looking at that data, that's into that planning too. Using our prevention strategies, we want to set up our environments and structures to prevent behaviors, knowing that classrooms need to be set up to have spaces for students to work in, to break in, to have time to just de-stress too. Make sure we're having time to teach our expectations. How are we purposely going to teach those lessons? At the beginning of the school year, it's easy. We know we're talking about what those expectations are. Here's the lessons. We're going to practice walking the hall. But what does this look like throughout the year? Okay, in October, we're going to have this. We're going to spend part of our morning meeting time to reteach this lesson. And we're going to cover this expectation later in December and return to reviewing it. That's a huge part of planning in advance. And that's something that we like our administration to do, is talk about so all our staff are on the same page and reteaching that together. Again, positive reinforcement. How do we let our students know that they're doing a good job? And that's something that the teams talk together frequently about. Do our students know that they're doing a good job? Do students feel like that? And then looking to make sure that we're planning ahead of time, modifying our systems when needed, or just making sure we increase our positive reinforcement if we're noticing that we're not giving it out. And then plan consequences. What are our logical consequences for behaviors that include reteaching? And these need to be taught ahead of time. They're not something that we just come out like, okay, you were running in the hall, we're going to do this. Nope, it is all set up on a matrix ahead of time. These are our majors, these are our minors, and this is what we want to go with.
So one of the parts with PBIS, of course, is the tiered systems to support all students. You have your bottom tier, which is what all students receive. Those are the school classroom-wide systems for all students, all staff, in all settings. The secondary is when you have students that need maybe a little bit more support. So this is our sum. And then you have your third tier, which is that for very few. This might be your 5% of students that need a little bit more. One of the things to talk about too is in some cases, people look at this and think gen ed, moving towards special ed, and that top is special education. And in PBIS, that top is really for your few students that might be moving in that direction, but that doesn't necessarily mean. So you can, within a school system, do that tier 3 interventions for students in the general education setting. So it's not necessarily tied to special ed to have in that tier 3. So tier 1, like I said, for all students, it's clear, consistent expectations. It is establishing structures and routines. It is reducing those negative interactions. So a big part of this is making sure our interactions with our staff are positive, or our students are positive. We have a common language. Students know what to expect. It's not surprising them that there's an expectation that they have to do. It's not a surprise to them. It's not a change. It becomes part of their everyday structure. And then when we go to tier 2, that's for our sum. This allows for our more targeted interventions. This might be a social skills group. This might be peer mentors. Maybe it's increased academic support, especially if you have a situation where an academic need may be prompting some behaviors. That's where you focus on that. You're really going to focus on the academic support, which will hopefully then help that behaviors. And this is when they're working alongside their peers. This is also when you do planned reteaching. So this is when you have a student who is struggling with an expectation, you're reteaching them the expectation so that they have a better understanding of what that expectation is. And then that tier 3 is for a few. This is providing specific instruction on positive behaviors. It is when you're teaching replacement behaviors. You're teaching the kids what to do instead of telling them what they did wrong. You're showing them what they need to do to meet that expectation. And then it's responding constructively to behaviors. It's not a punishment. It's not a negative. You're giving them the attention they need to help them get through whatever difficult situation they're in. So that tier 1, again, support for all. It's that teach, and reteach expectations and procedures on a regular basis. It's where if that first week of school, you do all the teaching. After a week or 2, you notice something isn't working right. Instead of having a punishment or something like that, you reteach that procedure. You reteach that expectation. It is developing positive relationships with your class around expectations. You might sit down as a whole class and create the expectations. You might have your couple few, but with the class, you talk about what is that going to look like in our community, in our classroom. What does it look like when we're respectful to each other? What does it look like when we're kind to each other? It's having consistent, clear path that all staff know and use to respond to student behavior. That would be that major minor, that would be that flow chart. So if this happens, this is how we expect our staff to respond. So that once again, it gives that consistent, structured response. So when a student experiences that with an adult, every adult is responding in the same way. Establishing procedures for supervision and utilizing active supervision. So this would be such as working with staff in the lunchroom. What does active supervision look like? Where are different people stationed? Where are they going around? What things do we have in place at recess? Once again, same thing. Beginning of the day, end of the day. Do you have staff in locations to make sure that areas are supervised in order to support students in the end? And then determining the means for instruction that meets all students. It might be small group, it might be whole group, it might be centers, it might be one-on-one, but we're really meeting the needs of all students. School-wide common strategies would be having a common social emotional curriculum embedded in the mainstream classes. In Osseo, our elementary schools use Harmony as their social emotional curriculum. In secondary, they use Character Strong. And then Zones is supplementary done in some of our schools. We also have programs in schools with that catalyst. Some schools do responsive classrooms, some work on restorative practices, but it's a school-wide common strategy embedded within the schools. Those clearly defined expectations, all schools have their matrices set. The expectations are location specific. So it's clear what is hallway behavior, what is classroom expectations, what does the lunchroom look like, what does the bus, and these expectations are positively stated. They're stated clearly in language understandable to the students. So they're not in adult language, but in kid language. They're objectives to make sure that we are not, we're not
choosing willing in based
one
on
or
what we see or
another.
not.
Visuals are encouraged and they're age appropriate. So at our Northford Middle School, they have be respectful, be responsible, and safe, and be ready. And then they define what that looks like. So these are posters that you will see in the hallway at Northview. This would be an example of the school-wide teaching matrix. So this is where, what does respectful mean in the classroom? What does respectful mean in the hallways? What does respectful mean in the cafeteria? What does it mean to be responsible? What does it mean to be resourceful? So at Osseo Middle, it's respectful, responsible, resourceful. Those are their three main tenets. And then they teach the students under there what each of those means, those specific expectations. In the hallway, you'll see signs that match those things. So the Huskies are safe, they are responsible, they belong, and they are respectful. At Oakview, we have safe, responsible, respectful, belong. So those you'll see in the hallways. We work on engaging students at the beginning of the year. Routines are taught and practiced. Some schools will have an assembly to teach routines and share successes. There might be follow-up assemblies to reteach routines, celebrate successes. Some schools will do like a passport or a rotation to make sure the students learn those routines throughout the school. The classroom environment, was this? Oh,
Great. Sorry, we're just switching back and forth. So for classroom environment, as we talked about, routines and structure are inclusive and designed to decrease the frequency and duration of those specific behaviors. And we really like them built into how the classroom looks like. The biggest thing that we work with our teachers on doing is really modeling for the students, showing them what it looks like. And that's that positive of, okay, this is how we line up to go. This is how we walk through the hall. This is how we walk into the music room, and really showing that as much as we can. And when we see that there's a problem, especially when it's the most of the class, it's not to punish, it's to go over and just show again, because modeling is the most effective tool we have with this one. Well, maybe other than planning, that's important too. I like that. We have a lot of our teachers, we want them to remind, and that's just, it's not like a consequence, you go do that. It's just, hey, when we're in the hall, we're using our level 1 or level 0 voices. And then the teacher is going to drop their voice to model at the same time with that reminder. We use a lot of visual supports. As Amy showed earlier, you see those all in the hall. A lot of our teachers even have visuals that they show. Some of them, we really like them to have just visuals that they keep on their lanyard that they can show about, quiet, whatever it is. They can point to them in the hall as they go by or in their classroom. Those are super important to have them in the classroom of here's our rules, and you can just point to it. You don't even have to add to it. So you're modeling what the visual support is saying. Reviewing those rules and expectations frequently. We talk a lot about that because it is super important of coming back to it. It's not just a beginning of the year thing. It is a throughout the year, talking about it, reviewing it, remodeling when you need to, and reteaching, even if that's going to go in. And a lot of times when we're seeing, okay, the students aren't learning this, I need to change how I'm teaching it. I can't just keep doing the same thing that the matrix says. I'll talk to my team, they can come talk to us, and we say, okay, we could teach it differently this way, because it's getting the students to understand. And a lot of it is it positively phrased, like Amy said? Is it age appropriate? Makes a huge difference. And then consistently following behavior rules and expectations. Once we have them, it's important that we follow them, both giving that positive reinforcement of, oh, class, great job following our rules. We did a great job coming in from recess today. And then when we see that we're not following them, we make sure we remind and model again as we're doing those, because students know that those rules are important and that they're enforced and followed throughout the entirety of the school. That's an important piece, that it is everybody doing it. And then revising the expectations if and when necessary. As we see and we look at our data, we talk about what that's going to look like. And then working as a team. It's not one teacher just changing it. It's done in conjunction with everybody. So we're all on the same page. That common language is there. And then those common expectations. Providing visual supports is super important with this one. And below we have a couple of what some of those look like. The voice levels in the hall is a fantastic one that you can have. You can see they've got the Weaver way here of showing me the 5, eyes on the speaker, voices off, ears listening, hands free, brain focused, all of those ones, what those visuals are. And then you can even just hold up your hand if you don't have it around. And we've got a couple another Weaver way there, and just having those visuals throughout the school makes a huge difference. And again, it's in student-centered language. This is not for the adult to understand. I myself love things in complex lingo. That's just me. I'm weird. But our students, it's got to be simple, clear, and able for them to understand. So we really make those visuals set up that way. And a lot of times, even like on our voice levels, you can see that the colors make a huge difference. They're very distinct. They're not confusing of like, hey, they're not different shades of green or yellow. They're all long. You can see them there. With our visual supports, when possible and appropriate, they're accompanied by visual representations. So we just want like the hand that you can show up that way, or even on the voice levels, I can show up on my fingers of what voice level I'm using. And that makes it so we can use them in multiple things. As you're walking in from recess, there might not be a visual as you're out on the playground, but as you step into school, it's there, but you can still show a hand of show me 5. And this has been really effective even when I've been subbing in classrooms. I can go in and I can do the show me 5 and the class knows exactly what to do. We get attention and we move on and we're able to move through our content a lot faster. Something we found to be very effective for schools. It does take a lot to set up, but it is video modeling. And it's making those videos of especially those common situations, and they're shown to the entire school to teach and reinforce those strategies. A lot of times this looks like what recess is, how you can get an adult's attention at recess if somebody's bothering you, or how to ask to share or to play with somebody. Especially at those younger grades, kindergarten, first grade, those are really good videos to show students so that you know what it is. Having some videos about walking through the halls of what it looks like, or just any different part of PBIS. A couple of our schools do a great job of having very frequent assemblies and showing these during them so that they've got a video to show. And it's really fun because you get the students involved. The kids make the videos and they see themselves and what it looks like. So you're almost getting the students to model in their own way. Like I said earlier, it does take a little bit of setup to make these videos. You can't just take it on your cell phone. You want to take some time to edit it, make it look positive about what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, one nice thing also is if you do have a group of students who might be struggling with an expectation, you work with them on making the video and doing the video modeling. So they become a part of that solution and they become a representation of what you're looking, and give them some ownership in it as well. So all of these strategies can be incorporated into using students to help doing it.
Yeah. And so this is just something that we show to all students for the assembly. This is not a specific one. You can do that later at that tier 2 and 3, but just for the entire school, having a video modeling of those expectations. Creating that system of acknowledgement. So you want to acknowledge students who are following the rules, following those expectations. And how we do that is reinforcing that at our assemblies. These are the students who are acknowledged for doing a great job for the month of October, of September, and having them come up and be congratulated in front of everybody. Morning announcements is a huge one. This week, our Huskies are name and name. We have some weekly drawings for whatever the prizes are. Some of them are different at different buildings. They really look like what motivates the students. Sometimes we even have grade level trophies of who's doing a great job. Up in the pictures here, we have for the Scotties. So it looks like the golden lunch pan for who's doing a great job in the lunchroom, or the plunger for the bathroom, the cone for recess, music. All of those are great ways to just reinforce. And we like to make sure that we're moving them between students and really reinforcing them. The little picture below is the pause behavior. These are the tickets, tokens that you can give to students and that they can put into a drawing for a chance to win at the assemblies, or for some of the older students, be able to trade them in for things. I know our middle schools and high schools have some complex systems where they count the number of tickets students have and they can trade them in. It really is what works for the students. So here's kind of a list of what you could use your pause for. So some of the fun ones I really like on here is borrowing the principal's chair for a day at 40 points. And this is really tailored to the students at that building. The principal is a fantastic guy. And when they get to use this chair, it's really fun because he makes a big deal and really adds to the hype. It's not financial or anything. It's just a fun reinforcer for being able to do those. Some of them are like stuffed animal day, wear PJs, fun things like that. And it's just being able to trade them in. And this is really where we use a lot of our data, looking about what works and what's motivating for students.
And with these, you'll notice a lot of these aren't tangible. So
Yep.
it's really giving them also connection time with others,
Yes.
play times with their friends, time with a staff member. So you're not like necessarily walking away with a trinket, you're walking away with more of a feeling that you've done something.
Yep. And then that really helps to generalize that behavior as the students get older.
So our tier 2 supports are support for some. Their interventions provide looped and repeating teaching and progress monitoring to encourage appropriate behaviors. You're choosing your students for your 2 tier and tier 3 based on your data and your feedback by staff. So those of you that also use MTSS, this system works into those MTSS systems when you're looking at that data and identifying who needs that extra support. This is when you'll work with support staff. So tier 2 can be done within a classroom or within a school-wide thing. So you can have tier 2 supports done in your classroom where maybe you have some kids staying for lunch just with you, or you're working on some skills with just a few kids, or school-wide, you can do tier 2 supports. You're determining very specific needs in an area, and you're providing additional teaching and modeling of those specific expectations. This could be things such as check-in, check-out. I really like check-in, check-out. It gives that person an extra adult to check in if it's not the classroom teacher. So they have a little bit more of that extra support. This would be small groups. This might be a lunch bunch. And it gives you time to build a relationship with students, provide them with staff they know and feel comfortable to work with. The small group instruction, it's always based on student need. Small groups are formed to identify very specific needs. It provides students with further supports, strategies, and opportunities to practice. You could have short-term groups, you could have long-term groups. I've done groups with zones of regulation with kids where just a small group works just more specifically on that. There's also the Superflex curriculum, which is fantastic for that small group instruction. Always student-driven. Looking at break spaces or areas provided in classrooms or other rooms such as motor rooms. So if a student is struggling, we look at that function behind why they're struggling and provide them a strategy to support that. It might be that they need to take a break either in the classroom or another room. They might need a large motor thing. Strategies are taught and then practiced through multiple opportunities. If we're teaching kids a strategy like mindful breathing or take a breath or push, pull, dangle, or any of those, we're teaching, reinforcing, and having them practice. Their targeted skills address per student need, and this is like the zone spaces where they might practice that. The tier 3 are the supports for few. This is when you're continuing to analyze data and feedback to identify students that may still need additional supports. This is when a student will probably more than likely work with a support staff. It might be a behavior intervention teacher, might be a counselor or social worker or whatever your school has in place to support those students. This is when you're determining a very specific need and providing additional teaching and modeling of those expectations. This might be one-to-one coaching. It might be a behavior plan. It might be providing additional supports. And this is when you're helping that student build even more positive relationships with staff that they know and feel comfortable with. And then some student-specific supports might look like this. So you might have your first then chart based on specific need. You may have the task of things. First, they go to the classroom, then they check in with students, then they do their work, and then they get a 5-minute break. You might have kind of behavior chart where they're a daily schedule. So the students know what their schedule is and they can mark it off through the day. So this, and a lot of these for some people might say, well, this is what my special ed students would use. You can use these with any students. They are beneficial for any student. So this one on the left here is like a check in, check out. So this one I used with a student at one time to help her learn to monitor her emotions throughout the day. And I use the data to understand what parts of the day does she need more support. So it was kind of a twofold situation with our check in, check out. We also have a daily chart so that very clearly identifies what goals the student had to follow teacher directions, to do their work the teacher assigns, and then they like asking for help, asking a question, asking for a break. So learning to advocate for themselves was the part of that goal. And then we just track throughout the day and then having that conversation with the student later about where did you struggle? What did you find hard? And what can we do to help you be able to accomplish that?
So I think a big thing that we wanted to talk about too is just that how the intersection between PBS and autism, and this goes for all disabilities too, because there is a huge intersection there. The direct focus of the PBS framework is approaching behavior support about what works best for autistic students, and this is all students. And we know that research shows that students with autism learn best when rules are clearly presented and routines are consistent, which is what we just talked about this entire time. I'm sure Amy and I said the same thing 3 or 4 times because it really is important. Clearly presented, consistent. And I mean, even as we're doing this presentation, we are consistent in how we're presenting that information. So that is super effective for our autistic students, and it's effective for all of our students with disabilities. It doesn't matter which disability it is. PBS focuses on the growth of students in both academics and the social arena. Students with autism benefit from those routines and clearly worded expectations that are typically used with PBIS. That makes a huge difference to be able to support them of having these expectations for school, of how to move throughout the day, what the expectations are, and then that translates into our academic realm. If I am less nervous, if I am less stressed, if I know those expectations and I'm happy to be at school, enjoying the time because I know what's going on, what's safe in the room, I'm going to be able to focus on my academics and growth. And those clear expectations work in our academics too, of like, this is what our one-on-one reading time is. This is what our small group reading time is. That makes a huge difference, and we see great growth in both academic and social arenas there. PBS's approach is helpful to promote our appropriate behavior and address those challenging behaviors. You know, we're trying to meet the students' needs. As the students are engaging behavior, it's communication, it's talking about what they need. And by having this PBIS framework, we know we're meeting a lot of the expectations. So when we see that behavior, we're able to spend time specifically focusing on what that behavior is communicating rather than trying to catch up on, oh, did we do all the preventative things? Nope, we knew we did the preventative things. It was set with a strong PBIS core, and we can focus on what those needs are. That consistent teaching and reteaching of expectations is huge and super effective for a lot of our students. If they're needing more time based on their disability or that reteaching, doing it for everyone normalizes that need. And to be honest, everybody benefits from that teaching and reteaching. It doesn't matter if it's disability or not, all students benefit from these interventions. A lot of times, like Amy said, we see a lot of in our special education classrooms or our teachers using interventions, but they work for everybody. They are super effective. Looking at our evidence-based practices, I really went with a lot of the ASD evidence-based practices. So on the side too, but it goes with all of them. In general education, you've got identifying and teaching expectations, the clear, simple rules and expectations. Like we've talked about, that makes a huge difference. Establishing our procedures and structure, the predictability of events and activities through establishing the routines in the classroom, spending that first week on teaching those routines, following up. And then when you know there's a change, we say, okay, class, on next Tuesday, we know there's going to be a change. We have our library day. It's going to look like this, and talking through that routine. And then when it happens, you teach library routine. Actively engaging our students, opportunities for all to respond and participate in classroom activities is a huge part because we want all of our students. It's not just those who want to participate right away, finding ways to motivate and engage all our students and creating a classroom for all our students. That makes a huge difference. Reinforcing those expectations helps to get the actively engaged students. So noticing when our expectations are followed, providing that pervades, and then noticing when they're not followed and providing that modeling and reteaching. And we can do this either verbally or non-verbally. That makes a huge difference of even in the middle of a classroom, I can just point to something, our rules on the board, and the class sees what's going on. That makes a big difference. We can manage our misbehavior, so private reminders partnered with discrete praise. So we're not calling students out in front of the entire classroom at all. That's not effective. We don't want to do that, and our schools are very effective with that one. But then talking to them when we need to give them a reminder and talking about it, and then giving them extra praise when those students are doing it, because it's that individualization on it. So then as I kind of talked about those evidence-based practices, so one of them is having the routine and structure. The consistent schedules, practice and repractice is an evidence-based practice for ASD. That goes right over with our expectations and structure and routine. The visual supports that we talked about are embedded in PBS through the expectation matrix and just the visuals in the buildings. We see those all the time. It can even be the visuals that we use of a hand sign as we walk through the halls, as I've said. Those visual supports effective for everyone. Using a task analysis is an evidence-based practice. And this is what we use to model our plans for modeling and teaching opportunities. We say, okay, how are we going to teach how to go to recess? Well, we need to line up. Well, what do you do to line up? and it's using that task analysis step by step. And that really makes a difference for a lot of our students who are having a challenging time with any one part of that step, because we've broken it down and the modeling shows what that is. Having that social skills training, looking especially at that level 1 with our harmony and
Character strong.
character strong. Thank
Yep.
you, Amy. Having that one for everybody makes a huge difference. And explicitly teaching it. It's not something that we only reserve when there's a problem. It normalizes teaching social skills for everyone. And then we have it at tier 2 and tier 3. If we're seeing that those two are not working, we're able to follow up of, okay, maybe we need some zones or we need some of this. Whatever it is, we meet that student need. It's very individual based. Modeling, as I've said before, super important. Staff are modeling expected behaviors throughout the year. And this is something that I know that our principals are going to be doing, what is it, next week with new teacher back to school week,
Yep.
is talking about what our expectations are. So staff know, okay, we're going to be doing this, so that they're getting back in the groove, the mindset of modeling for their students. We talk to a lot of our veteran teachers and they just do this naturally. It does take some time and practice to get there, but once you've got that modeling, you're doing it, it is very, very effective. And that's, as I said, effective for all students, those with autism and those with any disability. Reinforcement, we've got those all school system setup that we talked about throughout it, be it grade level 1s, the tokens, the tickets, the positive praise, and then sharing with the school to recognize those students doing a great job. That's really important, or within the classroom. We're not focusing on punishment, we're focusing on that praise and the reinforcement. And then video modeling is an evidence-based practice, and we just talked about how effective that is. Those buildings who use a lot of it, I think are way more successful than the ones who don't. All of them use some to a degree, but the more they do, it's very effective. And having specific situations, looking what it does, how recess, how lining up, how lunch, that video modeling makes a difference for all of our students. And you can even pull it out of, okay, maybe one of our students needs to look at that video individually during their own time as a tier 2, tier 3, or even as part of special education. Having that video is nice though. And they know it's not something that's just for them because they're weird or anything. It's shown to everybody because all of our students are all of our students. All right. It's to me. Right. Yeah. So benefits of PBS for students with autism and disabilities. It's providing that consistent, clear expectations. I can't stress that enough. Consistency and clear expectations are so important, and having them taught and set right from the beginning. We prepare for challenging behavior. That makes a big difference. We know, okay, as we're teaching about recess, it's going to be busy. Kids are going to have a hard time wanting to come in. So we're going to teach how that works. We're going to practice it. They might practice some of those things when they do small time out on the playground with just their class, practicing how to come in. Whatever those are, we practice for those challenging behaviors. Creating the supportive environment, and this happens all the time. And this is where especially having those other teams come into a building and looking at our environments and saying, okay, it looks like you're doing a great job with this, or we need to support a little bit more. It's a challenge, but it makes a huge difference to have those supportive environments. Teaching new skills and placement behaviors. If we can't teach the student the behavior, then we can't expect it of them. And by teaching it to everyone and having that expectation, it makes it so much easier for our students with disabilities and our autistic students. They're all on the same page. They're getting that teaching from the beginning. It doesn't need to be something where they're pulled out and missing class. They get to participate from the beginning. Our PBS promotes the social skills just through our teaching, having that common language and just what it is. It's fantastic. We've seen a lot of great success with Harmony and Character Strong. Promoting our communication development, same thing. And then encouraging systems for positive praise and reward. We're always looking at our systems for how to work into that, and just taking the time to give positive verbal reinforcement to students, or even nonverbal. A thumbs up goes a long way to our students. And really looking for times for students to succeed. So all in all, PBS is beneficial for all of our students. It doesn't matter if you have autism or a disability. These are beneficial for everyone. All right, I think that is the end of our presentation. If anybody has questions, or if there were Any chat comments I didn't see as I was presenting?
Thank you so much. I just put a few things in the chat as you were kind of talking to just connect some of the things you were talking about with some PBIS resources. So I put, there's some practice briefs, specifically for students with autism, students with significant cognitive disabilities, emotional behavior disorders, and then helping to support families to prepare for an IEP meeting. So I just kind of pulled a few of those things related to your talk and put those in the chat while you were talking. So just wanted to let people know what that was. But if there are questions, I will be quiet and you all can go ahead. If there's questions, you can unmute and ask, or you can put things in the chat. Just a comment that thank you for sharing. I'm not seeing any questions yet, but I do really appreciate the emphasis of we have a lot of evidence-based practices for students with autism specifically, but I love when you all emphasize these are evidence-based practices for everyone. They are very effective practices for everyone. And really help to support all of the systems in PBIS as well.
We've seen a lot of success with that and getting people on that mindset of that these are beneficial for all students makes it a lot easier for staff to start doing all these ones. Yep, it's a change of what some of us know, but it is evidence-based and it is beneficial. As we've had more and more conversations, we see more and more success and more buy-in from our teams.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. Maybe I'll just kind of share what's on deck here, and see if there's any other questions that come in as my view changed and I can't figure this out here.
Do you want us to stop sharing for it, Aaron?
Oh, no, I got it. There we go. I just had to find the right button that it wanted me to push. Okay. So we have until 12:05 for this session, and then from 12:05 to 12:35, we're taking lunch. And this link will no longer be going on. We'll all be going back to link 1 for the rest of the afternoon. So you can rejoin over there. And I was looking for the resources to share all of the presentations and everything. We do have that and we'll be sharing that throughout the day, as well as a survey, which has a CEU if you're looking for that as well. So there is a question. So what if the school does not implement PBIS school-wide, but we want to do it in our own classroom for ASD or CBP? I'm not sure what that is actually.
I would say it's the same structure and process that you would use in a school-wide situation. You would really want to start with what are your expectations in all your areas. And that's where Jeff had talked about that task breakdown. So things such as when they come in, it's like almost like breaking down your routines into if you were sitting back and you were watching how the students come in, what would you want to see, and breaking that down to be very clear. And then that's what you teach, those very clear steps. When you're talking a center-based classroom, like a center-based ASD classroom or something like that, you would want to be very specific about those things. It's going to be something you would practice every single time you line up, or practice and teach every single time. So it's taking that large scale and just making it scaled down for your classroom. You would have a visual schedule posted for everyone to see, the school or the whole class visual plus any additional student individual schedules. But just breaking down every routine into what your expecting and then teaching that. So for example, in some of the classrooms we've worked in, when it's time to line up, the teachers will get the little plastic circles and they lay the circles down. And then each student has a color. And so they've taught the students, your color is blue. And they would say, Jeff, go to your blue circle. Amy, go to your red circle. And
Yep.
so you're teaching those. And when they do that, that's that time for that reinforcement or that positive praise. It doesn't always have to be a ticket. It doesn't always have to be a tangible. It may be like, oh, I saw you go straight to that blue circle. You were a really good listener today, or whatever word you want to use for you, or a whatever all-star. So you can do it within your classroom. It is great if it is done everywhere, because then those same things will be heard by those students in other spaces that they're at. Or you do it for your classroom and you share it with staff or students that may be working with your students and saying, this is what their
Yep.
expectations are.
As they move to
As
a
they move
classroom
to
or
if they're in the
music
gym or
recess.
music or morning meeting. So you take those large scale things and you just break it down for your space. And just teaching those individual routines, teaching those practices. And then it's that reinforcement and understanding that if a student is not following the expectation, it just needs to be retaught. They need to be re-shown how to, or the expectation isn't appropriate. And you need to rethink about what that expectation is and adjust to something more appropriate. So it's something you can kind of tweak down into that classroom level.
So I saw in the chat that there's a question. So is it okay if we use specific awards for teaching behavior that the school-wide does not have? I just don't want them to be confused. And I think that's a very valid point about making sure that your students aren't confused. I think the biggest piece is looking at individual student need. As we talked about on all of our slides, well, on some of them, all of them was about consistency and structure. So I get your piece there, but it really is looking at that individualization about what students needs. If a ticket and token is not motivating to a student, it is not effective to do. And you're going to have to find a specific piece. So looking at like your center-based classrooms, you are going to have to figure out what is motivating for your students and use that as that piece. I think it's important that we look not just at tangibles, but also at really that relationship piece of an experience if you can, and then moving it to just even like a good job and that intrinsic value. That is the ultimate goal as we move from elementary to middle to high school and into adulthood. It's building that intrinsic motivation and doing that one. So yes, I think you could do that. And here in Osseo, we do have a lot of our center-based classrooms where it is specifically modified for individual student needs.
And I think even in like the general classrooms, you have your school-wide tickets. I mean, there's only so much you can do school-wide, and usually it is the paw print or the ticket, or one of the schools does gold coins or something like that. But classrooms will also have their own systems in addition to. So I know when I was in the classroom, we had our tickets, but I also did my own classroom-based things if it was needed. So we might do different tallies for certain things being done, and we would earn extra recess. It wasn't part of a school-wide system. It was my system in my classroom. So you can tie into the school-wide and also do your own at the same time. Our lights seem to be dimming here.
We got new lights.
We have new lights that are in our room that we're not quite sure how to use anymore. And so you almost make your own little culture within a culture, and you can have it tie in directly, you can have it tie in indirectly, and some of it may just be within your classroom.
I think the big thing though too with whatever you do though, it's taking that time to plan ahead of time and be consistent with it. Because if you're not planning and being consistent of how it is, like if you're the only person but your ESPs and the music teacher don't do it, it is not going to be effective.
Right.
It has to be for that student, and this is what it is. I have seen, and this is completely special, this is not within the PBS side, but IEPs can say what that looks like, or even a behavior support plan, behavior intervention plan, depending on what your district talks about it. We should be specifying what the reinforcement looks like very much within those documents. Hopefully that answered your question. Amy and I added a lot more. Awesome. Anybody else have any other questions?
Well, I just want to say again, Amy, Jeff, thank you so much. You have presented for us a couple of times now, and it's really, really valuable information. And it's wonderful to hear from your examples and see how it works across your schools and districts. So I just want to say again, thank you so, so much for being here and getting ahead on your back to school activities.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I invite everybody to come back this afternoon. 12:35 is when we will start again after lunch for our sustaining exemplar recognition. And I'm pretty sure there will be some Osseo schools in there. So
Yep.
it'd be great to see you guys there too. So thank you again so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you so much,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
I'm gonna stop the recordings. Let's see here. Go away.